let me introduce my panel for those who may not have met the panel. I think you've probably met the entire panel by now. You've certainly met me, so I won't go over my bio again. Sofia Falkovitch is a Paris-based mezzo-soprano. She's the first ordained woman cantor in Europe. She's the only one in France. She was born into an artistic family in Moscow and growing up in Berlin. She studied music, fine arts and journalism in Germany and Canada. Her voice is classically trained, and cantorial studies were for her in the USA and at the Abraham Geiger College, Potsdam. She graduated in 2014. I think somewhere on YouTube is your graduation, I think I've seen it. Her master's thesis was on the composer Samuel Naumburg and his influence on synagogal music. Sofia regularly gives concerts across the world, officiates at public events, and serves as a guest cantor throughout Europe. Aviya Nachshon grew up in Kfar Saba, Israel. He lived in Los Angeles for a few years when he started singing at the Beth Jacob Synagogue. He was a child soloist in some of Mordechai Sobol's concerts in Tel Aviv. After his military service, he joined the Tel Aviv Cantorial Institute and studied under the great Naftali Hirschtig. He also studied under Raymond Goldstein, Yotam Siegel, and Shraga Hirschtig. Pre-COVID, he was a cantor in Budapest here at the Bethlehem Square Synagogue, and since then he's been the chief cantor of the main synagogue of Kfar Shema Yaakov, Herzliya Beach, which is in Israel. Beny Maissner is a towering and highly sought-after figure as a cantor educator, performer, presenter, coach and mentor. With his degrees in music and cantorial arts and encyclopedic knowledge of early to contemporary Jewish secular and liturgical music, Beny's performed and taught worldwide. He's cantor emeritus at the Holy Blossom Temple in Toronto, Canada. He's conductor and music director of the Lachan Jewish Chamber Choir and is part-time faculty member at Abraham Geiger College in Potsdam. He also presents a session, as you have seen earlier, on his uncle altar, and we enjoyed that earlier on. And incidentally, if you missed that, it will be available later online. Jeremiah Lockwood is a scholar and storyteller. He's a singer, guitarist and composer with an expansive knowledge of musical traditions and techniques that range from cantorial sacred music to Piedmont blues. He received his doctorate at Stanford University and for 2022-23 is a fellow at the Yale Institute of Sacred Music. He's won several awards and has performed around the world as leader of his band called The Sway Machinery and as a guitarist in Balkan Beatbox. Jeremiah is extensively online if you want to look him up. And finally, but absolutely not least, simply because he happens to be at the end of the table, of course, is Beny Rogosnitzky, New York, born in Liverpool, grew up in Joburg, mentored there by the late great cantor John Gluck. Today, Beny's a world-renowned cantor, teacher, mentor, performer, marketing guru, and event producer, and he's been cantor at the historic Park East Shul and on Manhattan's Upper East Side since 2009, serving alongside the chief cantor, Mayor Helfgott. So, welcome to you all. Thank you very much for joining in this session, which is how do you make a ruach in your synagogue? Now we've started a bit late. We're not going to finish late because it's Erev Shabbos. I'm not going to introduce the subject too much other than to say, as I think we've discovered throughout this entire convention so far, and especially for those of you that were in Beny's session just before the break, that actually Ruach is the central thing that makes a shul service for the congregants. And we learned yesterday, again for those of you that were here, from Cantor Asher-Heinovitz, that of course, although it says Da Livnei Merta Omeid in front of the chazan, actually you have to remember who is behind the chazan, the Kehillah, ultimately that owns, if you like, the service. So I'm going to ask each of you just to give some thoughts. Again, as yesterday, I'm very interested to open this up for a dialogue in the audience. Ruach in a shul is something I think that we can all identify with. So I'm going to ask Beny Maissner if you'd like to just give us some thoughts first.
Am I chosen because I'm the oldest?
I chose you.
I chose you actually because you were in the middle and you were wearing a rather nice red top, so I thought that's why I chose you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh my God. I'm privileged to be the oldest one. We were called to present something, so I wrote a few thoughts which I would like to share with you. Abstract first, but then in some examples based upon my own experience. First of all, you should know that my rabbi used to say, Beny belongs nowhere and everywhere. You figure it out yourself. Ruach in a synagogue is very individual, personal subject, emotional, spiritual, and complex, to say the least. What Ruach is to one person is chaos to the next person. What is lively and spiritually to one is boring and flat to the other. I will not try to describe in any derogatory words what to me personally Ruach is not, rather bring and share with you my profound, honest and sincere belief based upon a background of my upbringing and my own experience over the many, many decades serving as Shaliach Tzibur since the age of 10 in the Bilu school in Tel Aviv and as a boy in Shlomo Avitz's children's choir. In addition, what shaped my idea of Ruach in the synagogue was the spirit of tefillah and an outburst of singing and the haunting moments of kavanah in my Beny Akiva youth movement and over 50 years serving as a chazan in both prestigious synagogues in North America. One in Philadelphia, actually three, the Bet Shalom Frank Lloyd Wright Synagogue. I was a student cantor there, and then Germantown Jewish Center, which is the birthplace of the Chabura of the Washkal, Art Green, and Sfat Emet, and whatnot in North America. A lot of it was uphill battle in order to achieve the kind of Ruach I believed in, which was not always easy. As for nowadays, what impressed me the most and left the mark on my soul was the slogan of my late Rabbi Dov Marmor, Zichrono Livracha. He used to say, congregations are be read, be preached, and be sung. I decided to try to change this culture by creating and work towards what I believe would engage a congregation and uplift the souls of my kehillah. Before trying to make any change, I suggested that one must learn of Minhag HaMakom. It is a must to observe carefully the surroundings and the musical styles, behavior, and the musical sources which were available in the congregation which you serve. One must measure how sophisticated, educated, musically and Jewishly and liturgically is your congregation. The core of the matter is totally believing in yourself, which is the starting point. Authenticity, religiosity, spirituality, and a solid education should always be the top priority. A Shaliach Tzibur should always be of musical sophistication, liturgical knowledge, a Yodea Sefer, and not be afraid of taking risks by trying different styles and different moments in places during the service itself, like we heard so eloquently from Beny before. The balance is the most important. The deep, profound knowledge of the Chazan and usage of precise nusach is of utmost importance. Haunting moments of peace and silence, listening to a classical Jewish musical composition followed by a joyful outburst of aesthetic, vibrant melody can create curiosity and wonder in the pews. Diversity of styles, Ashkenaz, Sephardic, Oriental, tempos, dynamic, soft, loud, slow, motion and fast chanting, traditional sound and contemporary art music of the Renaissance, and I'll give an example a few moments from now, a classical romantic mix of music. All of those above will contribute to the passive and active engagement. Nigunim of different genre between the Trikei Tfilot, even if the Chazan is able, like I was after planning receptors in the congregation over decades of trusting the Chazan, and I used to make up a melody, and also it was not halachically, actually it's more halachically than a lot of conservative and reform synagogues in the United States. I used to make up a nigun, and everybody sang it with me, by repeating it 3 times, basically like Carlebach's Nigunim are based on A, B, B, A, B, B. Very difficult. Beat singers used to sing the American folk tune. Repetition of leitmotifs, using Hebrew Yiddish folk material for some piyutim, remaining reminiscent of Israeli song phrases in tefillot are welcome, but not, and listen, but not the full hatikva for V'techazena Eneinu. Or V'haviyenu L'Tzion Yirecha for Yiddish Mame. This is absolute for Yevetayu. Imagine the melody of Yiddish Mame to be Yevetayu. But with Yerushalayim Bet Mikdashcha, B'Simchat Olam, a short phrase of Yerushalayim Shel Zahav is appropriate. Ki hayom hazeh, and I just demonstrated to Beny, it just came to me the last minute that I used Shir L'Shalom. Ki hayom hazeh. And even if the people didn't know that song, they whispered and joined you. But Erev Shel Shanim and Shalom Aleichem for Kedusha, to my mind, personally, is the lowest common denominator. What I achieved by be sung in the congregation is an engagement singing community which even davens with me and chanting songs with me with traditional nusach. Placing a large choir in the pews among the congregation results in four-part harmony to tunes like, be surprised, and I demonstrated it to Amalia Kerem in Israel when she asked me, how do you do it? I said, in the family service of Rosh Hashanah, I said to the people, please daven with me. And was silent, and people murmured with me. And then she said, how did you do it in the big service with 1,000 people and a 20-voice choir? So there are different ways of doing whatever you do. Jackie Mendelssohn came to my synagogue for a Shabbat resident, and he gets up on the bima and he says, I've never known the Tzafam melody is a congregational tune. Because that Shabbat I placed the choir in a very big sanctuary, which is 4 times bigger than this in length. In fact, in the old days, when I was in the back and the organ was up there was always a delay. So I couldn't do any pop and rhythmic dynamics. Of course, the organist at that time didn't like Jewish music, and he told the rabbi that it sounds like street music. So Marmara, who's a very cynical man, Alav Shalom, said, I got news for you. We are very vulnerable people. He said, תבוא לפניך, high holiday, אבות וגבורות. I took a melody of Stephen Glass for Nislach. I took the words out, and that became the leitmotif. In between Uvechem. Or even, I will conclude only by saying Ruach and spiritual experience is achieved by trying to shoot for the highest common denominator, which springs forth from a deep core of your own neshama. Just a few examples. I'm not talking about weaving a melody here and melody there, but when we came in our synagogue to do an Eile Eskira on Yom Kippur in the afternoon, I bought it from Philadelphia, from my German Jewish Center, an oratorio full of Eile Eskira. Of course, Asara Malchut were there, but it was almost the Ir HaRiga of Chernichovsky, of Yarik. It was also Moshe Shloimalach of Israel Alter. It was also the little boy poem from Terezin, and it ended up with Samachti Be'omrim Li by Charles Ashbourne. Ashkivenu, Helfman, again. Ashkivenu. How many times? In 1 year, I stuck in the Ashkivenu. By the way, I conducted the second time. Solomon Rossi Ashkivenu, in the middle of Yom Kippur evening. ניגונים בין התפילות, תבוא לפניך, as I said, in Hamburg. Kabbalat Shabbat, of course, became, within our Negina band, a very beautiful experience of members of the congregation. Imagine 2,200 families, or later on 1,800 families, a lot of good professional musicians who are put together, and the husband of the Elspletzi, the rabbi, is a jazz player by himself. I just want to finish with 3 moments, 3 points which I wanted to share with you. And Russell, with his good nature, has 2 links of 2 discs, 2 CDs of mine. One is a Kabbalat Shabbat with a beautiful arrangement of a 16-year-old boy who wrote this orchestration. It's like a disco. So it is really fantastic. And when I retired, I took all the melodies, a lot of melodies of Shabbat, I heard in regular, Shalosh Regalim, melodies that I taught to congregation. Even the Bob of Nigun, in a jazz form. I call it a twist on liturgy, where it was only an Israeli jazz player, Matan Klein, who was a jazz flautist, and my pure voice, my voice, and I share it with the whole delegates, and everybody will get it after the convention. And also, my student, who is now the cantor in the Liberal Synagogue in Hanover, I printed out an entire book of Friday night music, lead sheets music, which will also be given to the whole convention as a gift, a personal gift for me, because whatever is mine, I always tell my student, is yours. And many students have reached out to me over the years, and everything that I possess, it is still in my office, but I hope, and Amalia Kedem knows, that there will be an archive section of Beny Maissner and Holy Blossom Temple in the National Music Library in Israel. Something which doesn't have to do with the Ruach of today, but the Ruach that inspired me. There is a book out there, a scrapbook, a table coffee book of Israel Alter, which I gave to the Villa Seligman, at the time was the director Andrew Isaac, and today my dearest, beloved, close friend Aviya. Your surname I don't know how to pronounce, but it's Aviya Bismarck. So please look at it, because it was my scrapbook, the original scrapbook, which yellowed already. Actually, I will talk more about it in the How to Teach Nusach today, in the session of Ensemble. But I just wanted to mention, because I just saw you here, so please take a look at it. It's an incredible book that was produced by the Villa Seligman about the life and career of Israel Alter. And I took too much time, because I'm never speechless.
You never take too much time. Thank you. So if I was just to summarise that, I loved your opener, incidentally, in which you said that Ruach to one person is inspiration, to another person is chaos. Absolutely true. But in a sentence, I suppose, you were saying that the Chazan needs to know what they're doing. The Chazan needs to understand how much their kehillah is educated. And it certainly helps if the husband of the rabbi is a jazz player. So that's what I took from that. As you mentioned earlier, the gifts that you've given to the delegates, those will be available to everybody when we provide you with a pack after the convention. And thank you for making those available. Thank you very much. Sofia Falkovitch, how do you make a ruach in your synagogue?
Good afternoon. It's on? Yeah. I'm grateful again, one more time. I would like, it's not on?
Yeah, it's on. It's on.
It's working?
Yeah.
Oh, here it is. So good afternoon, and I'm truly grateful for this convention, the biggest European Cantors convention to date, for the organizers, for everybody who takes actively part in making it happen and sharing and learning from each other. What makes Ruach in the synagogue? It's obviously the question that every chazan is confronted with from the beginning throughout the career, and these questions evolve, develop, and grow with each year, with each experience. So let me quickly, maybe do I need to introduce myself? Where I come from, or not? Very quickly. So I will just, from this lifetime, because I inherited something from previous lifetimes, but I will not go into this because it will be too mystical to most people. But in this lifetime I was born in Moscow, third generation. Before my family was in Belarus and Ukraine. And I grew up with a very strong identity, Jewish Ashkenazi identity, where at the same time we were open to other cultures and religious perspectives of other people living, because my father was directing a theater in Moscow, and we always had a variety of different opinions, artists, journalists. By the end of the Soviet Union, that was a period of time where we had hope for a wind of change, and people were getting very creative and were not afraid to express their opinion in the most courageous way. When I was visiting the theater, because there was no babysitting, so this was my maybe first experience with Ruach in, let's say, a theater was replacing the religion. And that was a very important thing to say, maybe, so that there was a special atmosphere. There was, people were arriving on time for the rehearsals, and when the performance was happening, if somebody arrived later than 1 hour before the performance, he or she was too late. There was a whole, you know what I'm talking about, Leah. Thank you. There was a whole preparation, a whole ambience, how to prepare oneself spiritually to be in this specific place when things need to happen. So this is something that I absorbed very naturally when I was a child, and I was asking myself the questions, what are the messages? Because when I was sitting through some performances that were going on every day, you sit in the audience and you ask yourself the questions, so what is, why are they doing it differently today? What is happening with the light? What is with the mise en scène, with the scenography? What is, how would I change things if I would direct this play, or this opera, or this ballet? And at the same time, when I was a child, I moved to Berlin, and I was able to listen live to Chazanim. And immediately it was clear, like as if somebody was pushing me, saying, you need to be there, you need to be with them, you will not be sitting in the audience, you will be there, taking actively part what is happening on the bima. And again, but before, I didn't know anything about the cantorial modes, but I had a very strong intuition for what I wanted to do. It sounds a bit weird, but luckily I was able to study at a cantorial school, and I continue to study. I think it will be a lifetime study, because I'm a good student, so I like to learn. And so I was asking myself these questions. So why is the Gahal responding better today, or what are the things that are, obviously we can focus on some rational questions, but I think the emotional intelligence of the Chazan plays the key role. While we are on the bima, we can flirt everything we know about the Nusach, about the community, about Minhag HaMakom, but once we're there, and we're back to to the Gehal, we have other keys that are activated, which are have very much to do with kavanah and perception and feeling. And in this moment, magic happens. That is beyond our control, even though we are in charge. Obviously, we know what we're doing, and we are guiding the community in certain ways and certain directions. What do I want to add? Is there something I would maybe prefer to open it to leave it to other speakers and to be able to answer questions. So maybe one last thing. What I do, what is important in my work today, I live in Paris and I have an agreement with the community there, but I have always been independent and I really like and prefer to see myself as independent because I always chose what I wanted to do, with whom I wanted to work, what projects I needed to record, and I'm recording a lot. My first CD that I recorded in Paris was the chamber orchestra, was an introduction to Chazanut for a broader audience, where I worked with a team of my friends and musicians to create specific arrangements for these compositions that remained or that were passed on to us as mostly a cappella settings in the tradition, and we were trying to underline them with the chamber orchestra that would not overwhelm, but keep the intimate aspect of tefillah and shed some light to from certain perspectives where it needed to be underlined. So, for instance, there's one piece just with wind instruments or other. Anyway, there are many details, and there are also personal compositions in it. Later on, I recorded another CD where it was just focused on Chazanut, really voice and organ from a specific period, very specific, whereas the previous one was really a bridge between different genres, different languages, connected through music or text. And the CD that I'm about to release now, in the next months, we are approaching post-production, and I'm truly happy about this. This is a collaboration where we're bridging the door to open the Ashkenazi heritage that we have. I invited another singer, a Sephardi singer who has a very strong upbringing and tradition in this specific beautiful Sephardic heritage, and we are really taking, again, core prayers from our liturgy, and we tried to create creative solutions, how to engage in real dialogue with each other without sacrificing or without cutting short or minimizing each other's traditions. So this was very important to us because we're both grounded in Sephardi and Ashkenazi world. We could really easily make these exchanges and these possibilities where I hope, I mean, it really, I think, was a very successful collaboration, where we open the door and where we give possibilities to more approaches and creative possibilities. And we also used instruments, a cello and a canoe. So the cello originally, let's say, represents more the Occident world, and the canoe comes from the Orient tradition. But we didn't want to use just these instruments apart in the classical setting, but also make them come into dialogue and try to be as nuanced and as creative as possible. And each piece on the CD will have a different tone, different color. Vocally, there is really a range in styles, from the most dramatic to no vibrato sound to the ancient. it's too much detail. I will not go into this right now. But so these are things that, because we also mentioned this, I think, before, that there are always details that we focus on, and this creates in the global picture, then we have a bigger picture. But these details are very important to make all these elements hold together.
So you're obviously very passionate about that project. No doubt we will hear more
Your
about
mic
it.
is not working.
There was one thing that, thank you, there was one thing
Particularly that you said there that I thought was particularly powerful, which is your reference to the emotional intelligence of the Chazan in partly creating the Ruach. And actually that also linked to something that Beny talked about, bringing your neshama forward when you daven, and as you said, when that happens, magic happens. So thank you very much for that. Aviya.
Hello everyone. First of all, it's a pleasure for me to be speaking, even though I think I have maybe the least experience here. Even though I've grown up listening to Chazanut and following Chazanut. I'm not going to speak about myself as historical. I don't have too much history. But I want to speak about the topic because I did have this thought to myself when I started working at my previous job in Kfar Shmoyav in Israel. I started my job in the middle of the COVID, and I had to build myself because for the first time in my life, I had started to sing in a place where there were chazanim before me that were very, very good. And they didn't leave because they were let go. They left because they finished an amount of years and they said they want to go on. And in Israel, it's not very common for a chazan to drive to a place every Shabbat for 10 years. It's and abroad, you just live there. If you live somewhere in your community, then you're part of the community. For me, I have to drive every week to the synagogue or every holiday, and then I go back to where I live. So it's difficult. So the first time I had to find a way to build myself. And in the meantime, when I'm building myself as a cantor, I also have to, like you've spoken about, bring back the people, to make people enjoy. So I came the first time and also had my probe where they were testing me, and I did all these chazanut parts and all these nusach that I studied from Naftali Hershtik, and I did my best. And for them it was nice, yeah. And they hired me because I was good, I was okay. But it wasn't something special. It's not like people started speaking about me and then I thought to myself, how do I bring myself closer to them, and how do I bring them closer to me? And it reminded me of two things throughout my life that at the time were weird for me, and I had to think about them. And for the first time, I think I had an answer. The first one was when I was 18. I was teaching bar mitzvah students. And
not so long ago.
Huh?
Not so long ago.
Not so long ago. I'm 27 now. Yeah. And I was teaching this student that he was also very musical, and he was singing very nice. I think he was singing in a choir in London also before he moved to Ra'anana. And his father wanted him to sing something in the bar mitzvah. So I said, I have the perfect song that touches me and can make me cry. I don't know if you know it, but it starts, Kishem she'ani mitkaseh betalit ba'olam hazeh, ba'olam hazeh. And for me it's the most moving song, and it speaks about the talit and how you put the talit now and you put it also in the Olam Haba and how special it is. And they looked at me like, oh, it's a nice song. But do you have something like stronger? And I thought to myself, how? And I'm sure each one of you had this one time that you showed a friend a video where you sent him a song and you were sure he was going to say, wow, this is so it makes me move and it makes me cry. And they were like, okay, it's okay. And I thought to myself that for me, this song was so special probably because my family, we sing it at home together, the whole family. I think of my father singing it, and okay, we found something else, and we moved on. I still had that question. And then when I was the chazan here in Budapest, Budapest in the Bethlehem, so usually the minyan in the morning was pretty small. Even though it started at 9:30, maybe 10. The rabbi used to tell me, it starts at 9:30, but you should come at 10. But there was something special. They always wanted me to sing Mishabah al-Khaylat Tzahal, Avinu Shabashamayim every single week. In Israel, they would kick me out for that. And every single time. But they used to come, and even 5 people would stand with me on the bima, and they would do dum with their hands like this. It's like they felt it. We were singing together. We were looking at each other. They were smiling at me. I was smiling at them. And then I understood that I took these 2 stories, and I thought to myself that what makes the Ruach in the synagogue is the feeling of the family. And in bigger places, Cantors Beny knows more than I do, in bigger places it's difficult because you can't know what each one wants and what each one likes. But I thought to myself that the way that I will get closer to these people, because if you know, in Israel, my community is very unique. It's not a regular Israeli. That's one of the reasons it's one of the only places that still has a permanent chazan every single week, because no one is religious. And no one is religious, just me and the rabbi. But it's people who want the synagogue to continue to work.
Why used to go out?
Yeah, I used to come with a car, sing and smoke in the Kriyat Torah. But they don't come anymore. It's a very unique place. I could speak about it in person. But I found that the way to get to them was, instead of when I finish singing, everyone comes to me and says, Shkoyach, Shkoyach, Shkoyach. Instead of that, I would go to them. I would speak to them. I would ask them, what's Shabbos for you? What songs do you like? Or for Rosh Hashanah. I saw the rabbi doing it once. He went to this guy from this synagogue and says, what do you remember from Rosh Hashanah? What would you like? Even if you think that it doesn't have anything to do. For example, I used to sing in the first night of Rosh Hashanah, David Mizmor, and I did a beautiful nusach from Naftali. Then it gets to the Su Sharim. I told the story to a few people. And Naftali has, beautiful nusach. And then I hear people like this, doing to themselves, Rosh Hashanah night, Yom Kippur night, it's the middle of a Tehillim piece. We could do it in the morning, but now. And then in Yom Kippur, the rabbi told me you should do it. I took the other chazan, and we sang it together. We sang it together in the middle of the Tehillim, and we were looking at the people, looking at them during. And even after I've studied 4 years, studied Kol Nidre so much, studied the Nusach so much, after this whole evening for 2 hours that I was singing, everyone came to me after and says, Su Sharim was great. They love the Su Sharim. So the thing that I took to myself is, first of all, that I ask them. I always ask them, is this tune, do you like it? Do you know a different one? I also learned new things from them. And everybody these things. Yeah, because I'm young and they have these melodies that they like. And the other thing is that I try to look at them. When I'm singing, I always stand in the middle, so I look around to make them feel like we're singing together. And I think that I also see it with the amount of people it's rising, that people are connected. And also, in big communities, when you get closer to one person, usually there's a group. It's not each one of the 300 people is different. There's groups. These ones, they like this chazanut piece but only if it's a piece that they know, not just a new one. And this one likes the Karlebach. So for me, that was the way to get to the Nusach, to the Ruach.
Well,
thank you.
Shkoyach.
So if I was to summarize that, I thought the particular thing that you were mentioning there about it's a community thing. It's a community thing, and I guess there is a critical mass of size of that community, not too small, not too big. We've all kind of been there, where you are reaching out to that community, and particularly in your case, if you're not part of that community, that must be particularly difficult, but nevertheless very rewarding when that does happen. Jeremiah.
Well, it's an
incredible honor to be sitting here between these two very august figures in the contemporary cantorial world, spanning across generations, and also to be in this kind of fairy tale-like space. I mean, for me, growing up in New York City, my family are Hungarian Jews, and so being here is very, very beautiful and melancholy and wonderful. I grew up in a cantorial family. My grandfather was a great chazan by the name of Jacob Koenigsberg, and we grew up, my family, revering him and listening to old records of chazanos. And I was also a musician. I loved music. I played the guitar, and starting as a young man, I began playing blues music, also kind of from the same period as the great chazanos Falkovitch, blues records from the 20s and 30s. And I worked extensively with an elder blues musician named Carolina Slim, and that was the beginning of my career as his accompanist and sideman. And, you know, that's kind of been the story of my life, moving between these worlds of American roots music and playing in rock and roll bands. That's been my professional career as a musician. And then loving chazanos and trying to find ways to bring that, to bridge those worlds. And I've made over a dozen records, many with my band, Beny Maissner, where the focus of that project is on chazanos and nusach, but creating new arrangements around the music. My most recent record, I don't play on very much. I do a little bit as an accompanist, but it's an album of chazanim from the Brooklyn Hasidic community, and that's been very much the focus of my scholarship, because I'm also an academic. I'm just about done with a book that will probably come out next year about chazanim in the Brooklyn Hasidic community. And so all that is to say, I'm addressing two very different aspects of the Jewish community. On the one hand, I'm very involved in the Brooklyn Orthodox Jewish music world. I sing in the choir of Ben Miller, who's one of the kind of holdover from the olden style of cantorial music. He does very, very long, kind of concert-like Shabbos morning davenings, one Shabbos a month on Shabbos Mevarchim. And his choir is kind of like a training ground for young chazanim in the Hasidic community. And somehow I've gotten into the mix, right? I'm friends with the Miller family and with some of the other Cantors who are also fans of this kind of early 20th century style and are finding ways to make it active in the present moment. And then on the other hand, I address, I would say, maybe the extreme left of the Jewish community, the secular Yiddishists, people in the klezmer world, and then also kind of what I consider to be the mainstream of American Jewry, who are not people who go to synagogue. Right? I think I'm very different from the other chazanim sitting up here in that I don't work in synagogues hardly at all. I mean, my synagogue is Bethel, which is an Orthodox synagogue in Brooklyn, but I'm not a typical member of that synagogue, I would say, to put it mildly. The mainstream of American Jews do not go to shul, right? They know very little about, I guess, what would be considered the historical mainstream of Jewish practice, and yet they're very concerned with identity, and they're very concerned with music, with art. I mean, American Jews are not, they're sophisticated, right? They know a lot about art and literature and culture, but in the area of Jewishness, there's a kind of an impoverishment around their experience. So there is a responsibility for people who know to find ways to communicate. And for me, this is around creating experiences that tap into the things that I love about Jewishness, into the deeply abiding truth that is in the great artists of the Jewish world. And by that I'm thinking about these figures from the early 20th century who they crossed boundaries also. Right? All of the chazanim were addressing multiple communities. They sang in shul, they were oftentimes from Hasidic backgrounds, but their professional lives were in synagogues like this for Jews who were not Hasidic and perhaps not religious in their day-to-day lives. And that's the model for me. It's like, how can we cross boundaries? And who are the people who need this? And, I think for professional pulpit cantors, a lot of the talk is about, how can we make an appeal to people who come to synagogue? For me, it's kind of the opposite issue. How can we make art out of the experience of Yiddishkeit? And how can we draw on the historical traditions to create something where people aren't going to be... When people are doing something they really love, they don't think about how soon is this going to be over, right? Or, oh, it's going to be 5 minutes, oh, get out of here. Right, if you're in a concert hall listening to music, you want to be there all night, or people go to a nightclub, and are they go into a state of almost like trance, right? And in some ways, this is very much like what I see in Bethel and Bet Zion's davening. People come there. The davening lasts 4 hours, right? So that's normal for the davening to be 4 hours, and nobody, people come and go. It's not like they're necessarily sitting still the whole time, but no one's complaining about how long it goes. Right? And I think it's also important to note that Bethel is rather unusual in the Brooklyn world as well, right? It's not, if you go to a Hasidic shtibel, it's not like that at all. I mean, there they are, also watching the clock and getting it done as quickly as possible. And Bethel also addresses multiple Jewish communities, right? And very importantly, Bethel is a place for Jewish women to go to daven and to hear music that they love. Right, for your average.
The woman goes from the shtibla after they finish to listen to the Chazon there.
Yes, that's exactly, yeah. For Hasidic men, they'll go and daven in their shtibla and then come afterwards, because it goes so quickly, they can come and hear Musaf by Ben Zion. But for women in the Hasidic community, they're not necessarily required to go to shul, right? So for them, this experience of Mevarchim at Bethel is it's a kind of spiritual art experience, and I believe there's a key there. There's something there that can be generalized, that can be brought out into a variety of Jewish worlds.
So that's a very interesting take on that. So you're, in a sentence, what you're saying is actually the Chazan to bring a Ruach into the synagogue with people who are sophisticated but secular, and to bring to them a new art that they would appreciate. But what that requires most of all is the communicative ability of the Chazan to reach out to people that actually probably may not be going to shul in order to daven, but to appreciate the art of the cantor.
Yeah, and I mean, to the extent that I work as a professional Jewish prayer leader, it's for a community that produces high holiday services in a music venue, and I'm doing creative music, but drawing on new stuff, and especially on my grandfather's musical legacy and the greats of the golden age recorded cantor.
Thank you very much. So, last but not least, Cantor Beny, yours is the only shul I've actually been to of the ones that we've discussed. I've been a few times. I was last there, I think, for Slifness, in fact, which was 2 or 3 years ago. How do you've spoken a little bit in your previous session about this, of course, but how would you address particularly the subject of creating a Ruach?
So first let me say it's an honor to be with all of you. Especially I have to call out the senior of us all, Beny Maissner, because Beny, as I told him, Shmo Holech Lefanav, I'm very friendly with Jackie Mendelssohn, who speaks very highly of you, and many other chazanim that we both know. But all of you give a lot of hope to the future of cantorial music, and that there is a future. So let me just say, there's a few words in Hebrew that are very difficult to translate. So if you say someone has neshama, right? He has soul. What does it mean you have neshama? What does that mean? You have chayin. You say about it, but he has chayin. What is chayin? Charmed. And I think one of those words is ruach. How do you describe what ruach is? So I think that's one. Ruach is one of those things that you know it when you feel it. You're in shul. It's just, there's something happening. You can't describe it in music. I have a music in front of me, but it's so much more than the music, because two people could be singing the very same cantorial piece, and one is a dead end and the other one brings it to life. So first let me start, Russell, it's hard to describe what Ruach is. However, one thing that without a doubt brings Ruach is children. Kids in a service create inspiration. And I try at parties wherever possible. It doesn't even make a difference how good or otherwise the child is. Bring them to shul, have them come up there, let them sing. If they know the Hebrew, great. First of all, you got happy parents. Happy parents brings happy grandparents, which brings donations to the shul. And that matters because the cantor gets paid through some of those donations. However, what a child does is it also sends a message to the community that this will go on. So if a kid gets up and sings in our synagogue, the national anthem of our synagogue is the Dor Vador. I always bring up a kid. The kid can barely say the word Ledor and he's already standing next to me. Why? Because people look at it and then they feel, I can join. Because the cantor, while cantors are great, we can also be somewhat intimidating. People, and I say this in a positive way, you get up and people look at this chazan, this larger-than-life figure, and they're there, and then add it to the choir, you almost feel like, in my shul, even though we have a choir, if it was my vote, I would actually do away with the choir. And I would have the choir be the members. Because when they sing, they're the greatest choir, and they feel involved. So number one, I would say children, for sure. Number two, as far as Ruach. So, we said before that a cantor is like the adapter, and to me, the cantor is also the conductor, right? We have to, through any service, go through all emotions. You have to be happy. There's got to be in a service moments of joy. Jews are professional criers. We cry. Everything's in minor. And everything, every chazan speaks, everybody's crying. Now, the reality is we have a lot to cry about. We've had very difficult times. But let's also be fair. We've also had a lot of good times. And especially, I go back to the importance of the establishment of the State of Israel. There's so much to be joyful for. And what I find many chazanim do is, they sing these pieces and you're moved. But how much could you be moved? In an hour service, let's say, you're davening Muslim. Okay, I heard the piece and I'm moved. Give me something else. You can't eat challah every single day, right? You have to have different foods. So, if you're leading a davening and you're the conductor, you can add the tempo. Yes, you could sing these beautiful cantorial pieces, but then you have to bring in something that moves faster. You have to modulate with your voice. You have to choose nigunim that end on a high. And this, to me, is very, very important. How, they say in music, it's all about the last note that you sing. What you sing in the end, unfortunately, people don't remember. They remember everything, but the last note, the last thing you sang. First of all, a lot of people show up late, JFK, right? They just for Kiddush. They're showing up right at the end of davening. But you have to be singing songs that make them feel that there's at least a little bit of joy and hope. So my point would be, yes, the chazan, you start off, right? It's at the end of the day, it's in the minor mode, it's sad, but then you have to give them something, somewhere in the tefillah, whether it's in Kamocha, whether it's in Kilokin. I was in South Africa a few weeks ago, and the chazan in Cape Town, I davened with us, and I think his name was Honey Gold, and he sang this, I think it's a Kabbalah song. I want to say more people were happy there than any other piece he did. So I'm saying, yes, you have to do both, but since you are the mood setter, let's not underestimate what that means. I would like to give you one other example, and this happens to be with the sadder part of the tefillah. Because even within crying and dirges in the minor mode, there are different ways to cry. Not every cry is a wail. Not every cry is a sob. So when you're doing, for example, the Avarachim, I forget, you'll know who's Malafsi. Right? Okay, you set the mood. They know Avarachim, it's about our forefathers and what Jews went through. And then, when I get to the end of this piece, so I do one or two things. Either I do why? Again, it's a song that everybody knows. Or, if you want to be especially creative, from Steven Spielberg's Schindler's List. Now you set the mood. But when you're done with that, move on. Then sing something that's more exciting. So Ruach to me, like I said, we keep the nusach, but bring in children and don't only cry in shul. Have moments of joy.
So in a sentence there, thank you very much, Bennett. In a sentence, the chazan is the mood setter, and that those moods need to oscillate throughout the service to give people something to be happy about, not just to cry. And definitely always bring the children, because you have happy parents, happy grandparents, and they pay the chazan. So thank you very much for that. Thank you to all the panel. I'm going to turn to the audience now for questions. We've got about 15, maybe 20 minutes at the most left. If you are there any questions that you would like to ask the panel? And as usual, while you're thinking of those questions, I'll start with a general question to the panel. And this is to any of you that want to reply. And I'm interested to know whether you feel that Ruach in the synagogue is more of a challenge or less so, depending on the branch of Judaism, progressive, orthodox, etc. I'm interested to know whether you think that is a differential. And any of you can reply to that before I pick on one of you. So Aviya, you were particularly articulate there. Do you think that it makes a difference? Particularly because you talked about your congregation is not religious at all. So I talked about progressive and orthodox, but actually equally for people who are not religious. Do you think it's different?
I'm sure it's different. I didn't answer because I wasn't sure exactly how and in which ways. I'm sure that most of the answers here would work on any congregation, but when you know your congregation and you know the kinds of people, the kinds of families, then you would know how to make it better. For example, I can't involve kids in my synagogue because there are no kids. I'm the youngest one. Like my girl is 1 year old. So, but for every congregation, they have their melodies, their history. I think the connection to history that we've all, in a way, said a few words about the tunes that people know, that's what is common for all kinds of congregations, even conservative or reform. And I'm sure that maybe for congregations that can have live music, it might be easier to move. But I'm not sure that's the core of the idea. I'm not sure that if you put a guitar in my synagogue, then it's going to be full. I'm not sure.
Beny?
I didn't want to say that, but we associate Ruach with the highest decibels. And Ruach can be also in silence. It could also be in the words of Ella Eskara, starting with a contemporary 8-tonal piece. Which is a very complicated contrapuntal choral rendition of about 7 minutes, and then all the other readings. I also know that silent Ahavat Olam by David Friedman, Ahavat Olam Beit Israel. And then, of course, in Muslim, Yom HaShabbos, everybody gets married. And about kids, unfortunately, when I came to my Holy Blessed Temple, kids were not allowed to the sanctuary. And I said to the rabbi then, my kids come, they were 2, 3 years old, 6 years old. My kids come where I'm davening, not, but the spirit of the Ruach does not have to be the loud Ani Imsmirot, which most of the kids are out of tune anyway, but it makes everybody happy. The silence of impeccable canon, is as rousing one's neshama as also repetition. I know, without mentioning names, there's at least 2 synagogues now that no matter when and no matter what, and I even on Tisha B'Av, let לדור ודור, לדור ודור. How many times can you do that, לדור ודור? So the element of surprise when it's silence or listening, just near the most vibrant, exciting. So Shavim, we sang yesterday the thing, right? But you never did. And people ask me, what was that? I said, that is my childhood. So, lie, lie, la, 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 lie. But they complained that it didn't say, anyway, Ruach is an extreme, diverse moments in the service. It doesn't have to be in the last moment, it can be just very even Shochenah Marom. It doesn't have to be Shochenah Marom Kadosh Shemo, but Shochenah Marom Kadosh Shemo. Because he's up there, not down there.
Quietude and silence important. I found two audience members that have a question. I'm going to get a call first because he's promised me it's only 2 words.
Just 2 words. To add to what Beny said, I have had this revelation of a member of the synagogue. I was told that, in a way, people think that sometimes choir pieces are very long. You're listening to a choir. And this person told me there is a difference between passive listening and active listening. So if you're there listening, but it's telling you something, it makes it, you participate by listening. And I just wanted to add that in what you meant by silence.
Thanks. I think it's been fascinating to hear what the Chazanim say about making the Ruach. What I think is missing is, what about the person sitting in shul? Is there somebody maybe in the audience sitting in shul who could tell us what they think makes a Ruach in a synagogue? Would that be interesting for the Chazanim to know?
Well, this is the question I want to put to the audience who are sitting in shul. Now, I can see 2 hands. Some people will have recognized that Rabbi Michael Dushinsky was joining. You put your hand up, and Alex Stein put their hand up. I'm just going to keep you 2 in reserve for the moment. I just want to check if there's any other members of the audience that have a view about this. Robert.
Thank you. It's been a lovely talk this morning. Thank you very much. My community, Kenton in London, is just falling off the edge. Our average age is probably about 70. We used to have 600 kids in our cheder, and now the number of kids is a round number, shall we say, 0. The only way to get a bit of ruach or wind in our shul is we have the windows open at the front by the altar, open the back door, and there's plenty of ruach. But, so I'd like to know, I'd get some music from you for Inke Lahin, so at least we can end on a bright note.
Thank you very much. Do you identify with that issue that essentially it's an aging congregation, and particularly, Beny, you mentioned earlier that you've got quite an aging congregation. Do you find that it's an extra struggle to think what would be happening in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, and what's the groundwork that I'm preparing now for Ruach?
So yes, our community is definitely aging. We do have a school adjacent, but the parents and children don't really come unless there's a bar mitzvah or some other happy occasion. In some ways, the aging congregation can also be a blessing because the older members love Chazan more and they're more attached to tefillah. But when I look up there and 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I'm not sure what is it going to look like, because once these people pass, I'm not seeing necessarily this younger generation. Forget about children, as you mentioned, which is also hard because, yes, obviously you want children to participate, but sometimes you can't even bring them into the shul. But congregations that say no to allowing children today are beyond short-sighted. I mean, just from a business perspective, it just doesn't make sense because what's the future? So, but the answer is that even with 95-year-old people, you can create Ruach. It really depends on the chazan. Yes, if you don't have the children, then you have to work harder. The other thing I've done in my shul that I've found some success with is on the weekends that we don't have the choir, I meet with members that the shul love to sing. And you'd be surprised how many people love to sing. Most of those who don't know how to sing actually love to sing. But the fact is, we meet with them on, let's say, a Tuesday or Wednesday, and we plan out 3 or 4 pieces, and they are in shul Shabbos morning at 9 o'clock. Because now they feel, they're ready, and they say to their wife, I'm going to be the cantor today this Shabbat, or whatever it is. So the point is, yes, you have to engage the congregation not only on Shabbat, but whatever you prepare on Friday is what you need on Shabbat. Here you have to work with the members during the week.
Thank you. Amalia, I'm going to go to Amalia, and then Alex. Michael's asked a couple of questions already. We are going to finish at 1 o'clock, because it's Erev Shabbos.
Thank you. Maybe any of you can address the question of mixed Ashkenazi and Sephardi kahal, because Ruach for Ashkenazim, you said we Jews are very good at crying, but that's Ashkenazi Jews. And, Sephardim, when they go to do first slichot, as some Israeli musicians have said to me, they meet for tea with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, and they say, let's sort this. And so the fact is, in Israel anyway, that there are many mixed communities, or many Ashkenazi communities that have many Sephardic members, and also the fact that the public sphere, the musical sphere, is absorbed with a lot of music that is not necessarily Ashkenazi, but it penetrates the synagogue. And so Ashkenazi communities as well welcome new songs, including incorporating new piyutim, Sephardi piyutim that don't appear in the Ashkenazi book, in order to have them sung. It would be Adonai Selichot, whatever. And so, is that something that you encounter, or if you have any thoughts about that kind of mix of Ruach?
I think I should answer this because all of my permanent congregants are Sephardi. I forgot to say that. So everyone is Sephardi in my shul, even though the shul is Ashkenaz. Also, the tefillah is Ashkenaz, not Sfarad, Ashkenaz.
Why is
and everyone is Sephardi. So
why is it Ashkenazi then?
Tradition. And they're fighting. For those 10 people who really daven every day, we have 2 minyanim. The Sephardi and the Ashkenazi, so both of them don't have a minyan in the middle of the week because they're always fighting. I'm just doing my job. So lucky for them, I also, look, I'm not so white. So I also sing some Sephardi tunes. And in the high holidays, we sing even things that are not. We stop in the middle of the davening and we sing. We sing everything. And we say, we sing a lot of things, and I also put it in. For example, when we have Aviya shul melech melech elyon, so I put the Naslichot tune on it. Melech noah be'olam melech elyon. So I put the tune for that, just for them. Also in the Chadodim, when I see that some of the real Sephardi ones who actually know tunes, when they're there, so I put a Sephardi tune on the Chadodim.
Example?
For example, if everyone knows a famous Shabbat song, so I do it. So I do it on Shabbat, yeah. So for me, I mix it.
Well, hi, that's fine. Last question to Alex.
Okay. Two observations. One is when I was Two observations. When I was growing up in London in the 50s, every shul had a prominent chazan. And as children, we used to go to the shul and we joined in and it was quiet. Every kid of my age group knew Hebrew, knew Nusach, knew the tunes of the synagogue. I presume that's missing today in most cases. Right? How to get over that? Secondly, my dear friend Solzin said he bought it because he said 90% of American Jews cannot read or understand Hebrew. So how to get them involved so they won't feel embarrassed. Do the bim bam, so there was no bim bam on the chazan. So the joy of Shabbos, the joy of Hanukkah, the joy of whatever it is. And then, as Beny was saying, getting the children involved with bim bam bams, and then get the parents involved, create choirs, etc., etc. Is this part of what you're doing in your shul, Beny, or anybody else is doing it in their synagogues because of the same reasons? You know, midnight slichot, people went in, they were passive. An hour before slichot, if you weren't in then, you couldn't get a seat in Great Portland Street Shul. You know, Simon Hassan, which just passed away. And this is, do we create it through the name of the Chazan, like Helfgott and Benzir Miller and so on and so forth? As that drawing people into shul would be passive, but it creates people to come because of the name, or do you have to do more today than that?
Beny, I think that was a question to you.
Because you have an Orthodox shul and you have income.
First of all, I'd say Salzim, those sort of songs, they're great, because it's true about the 95%. Most people don't know how to read Hebrew, and even those who know how to read Hebrew don't even understand what they're saying. Even my friends that are Orthodox, I say to them on the daily davening, do you know what you're actually saying? They have no idea, they haven't thought about it. But I'll say what Jeremiah said about Benzir Miller, who I think is just a phenomenal chazan. What I see happening is that world is gone. They may not know it's gone, but it's gone. And the new world that is coming to shul, like that's coming to Ozzy Shul, Park Avenue, they want a different kind of service. So I envision, let's say, 10 years down the road, you'll hear one piece of real chazanut on Shabbat, and the rest will be communal singing, congregational singing. And one thing is for sure, the more that you sing, and you sing melodies that people feel they can connect with, the happier they leave, the more chance there will be a returning customer. So, you know, one definitely leads to the other. But the days of Simon Hassan, it's gone. And we have to accept it, and it's okay, that was good for that time, and we have to bring in a new age.
I'm going to leave it there just because it's 1 o'clock, it's Erev Shabbos. Just listening to Beny saying the happier they leave, the more chance there'll be a returning customer. I hope you've been happy and will return for the next panel session, which is on Sunday morning on a different topic. I just want to say thank you to everybody. I think we've learned some really important things today. The emotional intelligence of the chazan as the mood setter, the chazan's need to communicate, particularly with more sophisticated people. The fact that actually you don't need loud decibels in order to create a ruach, and that even if your entire congregation is Sephardi, you can still do Ashkenaz because it's the tradition and the minhag of the shul. So thank you very much to everybody who's contributed.